Bernard Tobin here at the Southwest Ag Conference, joined now by James Garriss of Browning Media. And James is a historic climatologist, right?
That is correct,
Awesome.
yes.
And it's that time of the year when we're interested in the weather, and James has just done a tremendous presentation. And I guess, James, let's kick it off with what you see from a weather perspective the rest of the winter as we head through the months before spring.
Of course. So when we're looking at winter, the big impact that we're going to have is twofold. One, we have a very warm Atlantic, and secondly, we have polar jet stream patterns that like to dip into Ontario. So many of your followers might have seen polar vortexes being mentioned quite a bit. We may experience somewhat similar conditions. We're going to have cold air coming from the north, dipping into normally central Ontario during the early part of winter, and further south into southern Ontario during the remainder of winter time. So it means that you're going to see an increase in cooler temperatures, and you're going to also see more precipitation, both rainfall and snowfall, primarily in central and southern and eastern Ontario. And then northern Ontario, it's wintertime, it's going to be cold and snowy. It's kind of an easy one there.
Just the way it goes. Hey, let's talk about the springtime as we get into planting season. And, in Ontario and across Canada, we've got obviously people interested across the country. How do we see planting season this year?
So the good news is, unlike last year where you had winter snowstorms go through April and even into May for some regions, while you will likely experience some snowstorm activity in early spring, that's mainly going to be the later part of March and maybe early April. And the good news with that is it does mean that once that snow is melted, you will have relatively good soil moisture through most regions of Ontario. The only area that I feel a bit of concern about is Western Ontario, especially the areas kind of closer to the Prairie Province regions. But otherwise, we're looking at relatively good soil moisture and likelihood of good rainfall through the remainder of spring. It won't be until summertime that I see there being a bit of problems with warmer temperatures and a bit of a, not drought per se, but longer stretches in between storm activity.
Now, one of the typical questions you get this time of year, is it going to be an El Nino year or a La Nina?
Well, there's a 90% chance that we will have an officially declared El Nino sometime this winter, likely February will be when it's official. Now, what that means for people in Ontario and around Canada in general, you're looking at El Nino conditions have been influencing this country now for about 3 or 4 months, because an El Nino isn't officially declared until a certain range of the ocean is at a certain temperature 7 months in a row. So because of that, it means that with El Ninos, normally in eastern Canada in general, El Ninos make things a bit drier. But because of the warmth that you have in the Atlantic and the fluctuations of the jet stream patterns, and the fact that the El Nino is going to be weak and only last through spring at the most, we're not anticipating it to dry out things quite as much. The good news for Canada as well is it will bring some rainfall to British Columbia, which I know they desperately need right now. So,
from a market perspective, how do you think it'll play? From a crop pricing perspective.
In general, so when an El Nino is mentioned in mainstream media outlets, that's kind of what makes stock people take notice. In general, what you see are your non-tropical commodities, your corns, your soys, your wheats. Those will go down in price because El Ninos for North America basically means better growing conditions. And what you see is in return to that, the tropical commodities, your rices, your oils, things of that nature, will go up in price. What we'll then see is that the drop in price and the raise in price are very extreme at first, because the market has a tendency to overcompensate. And then when those first yield estimates come in, and it's shown that you'll get a lot of wheat, but you're not going to break a global record, or you're not going to get as much rice, but it's not going to be a rice famine in Indonesia, then you start seeing the prices normally level out, usually about a month to 2 months after the initial height or drop. By the time the El Nino's done, prices will then start to mellow out in general for the commodities market, and they'll stay kind of level for a good 2 to 3 months after the El Nino ends, so they can get some stability before they go through their next surging pattern.
Any final thoughts on what it means for farmers moving through the winter in crop plants?
Unfortunately, I'm because I'm not a farmer, I would never tell a farmer what they should or shouldn't plant, because they have years of experience and generational experience a lot of times, because they're multi-generations in their family. But what I would say as a general is, like I said before, you're looking at positive soil moisture, but I think you're going to see a little bit later. Planting going to have to occur a little bit later, not as late as last year, where some farmers weren't able to plant until May or late May. But I'm looking at probably mid to late April will be the normal time for planting through most regions of Ontario. But as far as what they would want to plant, that I leave that to their expertise, because they would be far better at knowing that than I.